start with something smaller that still feels a little scary, but is a stepping stone towards.
Welcome to the Manders Mindset Podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Hey guys, welcome back to Amanda's Mindset. As always, I'm your host, Amanda Russo, and I am here today with a very special guest. I am here today with Christina Wong, and Christina was a cake designer for over 10 years, and she made a huge transition into coaching. And we are going to get into all of that today and how she made her transition. Thank you so much for being here with me, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. I'm so happy to be here.
Of course. So I'd love if we could get into a question I typically ask my guests is, who are you at the core?
All right. At my core, I am someone who deeply values connection and growth. So I love surrounding myself with people who have a growth mindset. And I am someone who aims to always be open-minded about what I know and what I don't know, and kind of ever evolving.
That's awesome. Okay. So I'd love to get into like your background and your upbringing, your family, kind of how you developed wherever you want to take that.
Sure, absolutely. So I am currently in the Toronto area of Ontario in Canada, and mostly grew up in different cities around Toronto. So I was born in a town called Hamilton. I am the youngest of two kids. I have an older brother. My dad passed away about 10 years ago, this year actually. He was born in Hong Kong, so I'm half Chinese, hence the last name Wong. My mom is Polish, Finnish, Swedish, so I'm a pretty big mix, and had a pretty cool, diverse upbringing in terms of some cultural things and food and things like that. But overall, a pretty traditional household where mom stayed at home while we were young and kind of cooked for us and made sure we were taken care of, and dad went to work. My dad was very traditional in how he saw his role as a parent. Definitely a little bit old school in terms of don't cry, especially in public, and, have that kind of strong sense of self when you're out in the world. Protective of me. I was daddy's little girl for a long time. We had a very special connection, and my brother and I did not get along until we were adults, I would say. We kind of were opposites in a lot of ways, and really, I don't know if it was, I wonder if it was a little bit of trying to find our place, our role within the family, and both feel special, but in very different ways. And yeah, that's kind of the gist. It was very much respect your elders and do as you're told, and that kind of household. So I often felt a bit like the black sheep, because I would question things and wanted to know the why about things. And I would say I'm more of an introvert. My brother and my mom are both more extroverts. And since I interacted with them more so than my dad, because he was often working or traveling for work, I felt very other during a lot of growing up. So, yeah, I think that's the gist of it, but I'm happy to answer anything else if you thought of any questions.
Okay. Was it just you and your brother? Because you said you were sharing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how do you, so you mentioned that you were more introverted because your mom and your brother were extroverted. Yeah. So what makes you think you didn't get the social dynamic like they did? Like they were outgoing and
Yeah, they were more outgoing, and it was just often pointed out that I was different. So if I didn't want to be out all the time with my friends, it was questioned like, well, why not? Kind of, it felt to me like, what's wrong with you that you don't always want to be out with your friends? And I felt like I had to justify who I was a lot when I was younger. And I mean, they're both, I love them so much and they obviously meant well, but that was my experience when I was kind of a preteen and early teenager, especially. I just, I like people. I'm not shy one-on-one, but the bigger the group, the quieter I often get. And to recharge, I do like to have that time to myself to kind of plug in my battery and charge up and fill my cup.
I gotcha. Now you mentioned you felt like you had to justify who you were.
Yeah.
Would you say that led to any people pleasing?
100%.
I didn't want to like influence you by like, but yeah, the justify word really made me justifying yourself to anybody, whether it's
Yes.
family, whether it's friends, whether it's in a workplace, to me gives the people pleasing vibe.
Absolutely. And it's something that I've worked on a lot in my own journey of personal growth. And I still have moments, I still catch moments where I'm over explaining the reason for a decision. And, I can be lovely when it's with people you love and you want to make sure that they understand where you're coming from, but it's just not always necessary.
No, I completely agree. I've struggled with people pleasing a lot in my life and just not wanting to disappoint other people. Even still making my decision and like this is what I'm going to do because I've always been one of those people like this is my decision. But having a hard time with facing somebody else or saying it because I don't want to disappoint anybody. I want everybody to be happy. Like
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that. So similar to you, I haven't necessarily not followed through for myself when I've had, a decision in mind that's different from what my parents think or just somebody I care about thinks. But I definitely have that. I don't want you to be disappointed and let me explain all my reasoning as to why I chose this and why it's right for me. And yeah, that can be exhausting.
yeah, it definitely can. How have you started working away from that?
So for me, I started more from a place of working on perfectionism. So I call myself a recovering perfectionist, which leads into people pleasing for sure, right? Because you don't want to disappoint, you don't want to feel rejected, and things like that. So working on my self-esteem, building that like bank of self-esteem for myself with following through on little things for myself. So not just putting everybody's needs before my own. So even if it's, you know what, I want to go to bed at this time and my partner wants to stay up late. If I need to take care of myself and go to bed a little earlier, I'm going to follow through for myself because my needs matter as well. So it's been things like that and really getting in touch with what my core values are so that I don't feel as much of a need to justify to everyone else. If I feel like my decision is sound and in alignment with my values, then that's all that matters.
Okay. I love how you mentioned the little things because that is a huge thing. Like keeping promises to yourself, whatever you say you're going to do, like your self-esteem is going to be fucked if you say you're going to do X and you don't. Whatever it is, it could be it destroys confidence. It destroys everything. Like you feel like shit. You know?
Yeah. And I even was tuning into that when I did it for work as a keep designer. And, if I was falling behind on emails, instead of, I would just say, I'll get back to you tomorrow, instead of slowing down and questioning, wait, do I have the capacity to actually follow through with that? Whereas now, whoever it is I need to get back to, I will get back to you within 3 days, but I slow down to think about it so that I can follow through. And then again, it adds to that, like those little habits of building the self-esteem. I know a lot of us kind of want to jump to the big change and see that overnight change of like, well, I know where I want to get, but it does take building that muscle over time and many small experiences to get there.
I completely agree. I love how you mentioned like slowing down and thinking about it. That I like that correlation with the self-esteem and the keeping the promises to yourself, because that is really, I think, a great way to help you keep the promises to yourself. Even like your email example was really good, because you might not be able to actually do it tomorrow. And
Yeah.
you're going to disappoint somebody else. You're going to disappoint yourself. You're going to feel low self-esteem. It's going to, I like that. Like everybody talks about slowing down and thinking, and like I'm big into your breath, and I emphasize slowing down, but I like how you mentioned it with like the little things that you're going to do, but even before making the commitment to yourself, slowing down and figuring out what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And then on top of that, I'm less likely to say yes to something when I don't have the capacity if I take the time to think about it. So can you tell me a little bit more about what I would be saying yes to? I get the information. Okay, I'm going to sit with that for however long I feel I need, 48 hours, tomorrow, whatever the timeline is, and I will get back to you. And then I can tune into my body, right? And how does saying yes feel in my body? Does it feel expansive or does it feel constrictive? And that often will lead me, especially if I'm unsure which decision is going to be aligned for me.
I love how you mentioned like feeling into your body. That's so true, because our bodies tell us so much. You just remove the distractions, get a little quiet, like don't have your phone right with you, and your body will tell you some stuff.
It sure will. I had a situation like that last week and my head was racing and I thought, I need to ask people. I need to ask the people closest to me what they think. And I was like, no, you have the answer inside. You actually need to quiet down and tune into that instead of outsourcing. So I wasn't always able to do that. I would ask everybody what they thought, get everybody's opinion, and pick the one that felt less scary to me. And I would usually go with that. And now I'm able to slow down and be like, you have the answer. And you just have to, you might be a little afraid of what the answer is, but it's in there and you just have to listen.
Okay. Was there something that helped you realize this?
So it's been using multiple tools over time. It's been building my toolbox that has gotten me to the point where I'm able to recognize those moments and implement the tools that I've learned. So when I tell these stories, I don't want people to think tomorrow they're going to be able to change everything and implement these things right away, because they do take practice. and we're not going to be perfect when we're practicing them. So first and foremost for me, it was realizing, oh, I'm spinning. I'm like, it feels chaotic in my head. And that's a red flag for me that, oh, I need to actually slow myself down, slow my body down, regulate my nervous system, often through breath, which you're a big fan of. And then slowly start to try to tune into what my intuition is telling me. And I had to relearn what that intuitive voice sounds like, because for a long time, I thought my egoic voice was my intuition, and it was
Yeah. So you mentioned your toolbox. I'd love if you could elaborate on some of the tools in your toolbox.
yeah. So there's a lot of exercises that I will try to implement in certain moments, and then I'll dive into a little bit of the somatic practices, not in detail, but just to touch on them. But so it'll be small things like following through for myself. So just the mindfulness around what is important to me right now. What are the priorities that keep me grounded and centered in my life right now? So for me, right now, yoga in the morning is a big one. Hasn't always been, but in the last 6-7 months, it's become a really grounding tool that I use every morning to connect to my body and my soul, not just in terms of having a workout, but connecting to the sensations in my body as I'm moving it, and my breath and things like that. Other tools are giving myself space and time to be quiet, so that I'm not always surrounded by a phone or laptop or, a TV show in the background or something like that. So getting out in nature is a big one. I love being able to do that, putting my feet on the earth. So these are and end up being somatic practices, but so grounding myself or earthing myself is a big one. And I do a cold like shot at the end of my shower every time I shower. So kind of working my vagus nerve tone to just kind of keep me balanced as well. And then when I'm noticing moments of feeling defensive, let's say, I will also pause the conversation if I need to. So if it's with my partner and I'm starting to feel really defensive, I'll label it, because I find that helpful. Hey, I'm starting to feel defensive. Can we take a break so that I can kind of ground myself? And very often we are both needing it at that point anyway. But even if it's just for me, it takes me to a calmer place so that I'm not in survival mode and kind of attack mode. And I can listen to what my partner, what that other person is trying to communicate with me. And then as I'm taking that break, once I'm more regulated, tuning into what's the narrative, what story am I telling myself about what just happened? So I carry, like all of us, certain stories from, childhood and such that put me on the defense when I'm feeling triggered, whether it's, I'm not good enough, or I'm only worthy if I'm doing something for someone else. They don't care about me. So whatever these narratives are, I try to tune into and then question, is that accurate? Or is that just from the past coming up and trying to protect me? But maybe that's not what's actually happening here. Those are a few. There are more, but
Okay, no, I gotcha. I want to backtrack a little bit where you mentioned yoga, and you mentioned you've been doing it about 6 or 7 months. But I love how you said it hasn't always been something that you've done. It hasn't always been a practice of yours.
yeah.
And that is something I really try to emphasize to my listeners and my clients, that just because it works for you today might not work for you in 6 months. Or just because you're not doing it today, it might be something you do every single day in 6 months. We're fluid. It's all changing, like just because something works great for me, it might not work for you.
Yeah.
It's different. And I love how you mentioned, like, it hasn't always been something you've been into.
Yeah.
How'd you get into yoga?
So I have dabbled in yoga over the years, probably the last 10 years or so, a few classes here or there, or if a friend is going, I might tag along, but it was never a regular thing. Working out in general had never been a regular thing for me. And I went to a wellness retreat in October of 2023 in this beautiful jungle in Mexico at an eco resort. And we started each day with yoga. And for me, anytime I was going to work out, I was like, I'll do it at the end of the day. Let me get my work done. And then I'll do whatever workout at the end of the day. And then by the end of the day, it never happened for me. But the story I told myself is I get hangry in the morning, so I have to eat first. And doing yoga on a full stomach doesn't feel great. But when I did this retreat for, 8 days, I was like, oh, so I actually can do yoga before I eat. Gotcha. So it just proved that my story wasn't accurate. And so I was able to implement that into the beginning of my day as a way to, like I said, connect to my body. I also de-emphasized it being a workout and the goal of like, I gotta look fit, and made it more of a ritual to connect to myself and ground myself.
Okay. Well, okay. I love how you mentioned the word story because everything is a story. Everything is a story, whether it's something we're telling ourselves, whether it's a situation we're experiencing. It's just all stories. And it just comes back down to like what are our thoughts saying to us. I really like how you made that shift as to you have to look fit. It has to be this workout. You have to eat before, but you don't want to be on a full stomach. And then you shifted how you looked at it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it, but I was open to it. So that's how it has unfolded for me. And I've been loving it.
I'd love if you could walk us through like the steps leading up to this retreat. You go on it.
Yeah. So it honestly, it came from a conversation with my partner where we were talking about travel. And he was like, you know what? He's been renovating his home. And he said, I don't think I can afford to do it this year. We did a big trip last year. I don't think I'm going to be able to. And I was like, okay, that's totally understandable. I have a budget for travel and I would like to do something. So I was trying to think of something that resonated. I had done trips on my own before, and they were usually like tours. I did Spain and I did New Zealand, and I loved them. They were incredible, but very busy. And I thought, you know what? I think I want to stay in one place. I don't think I want to be hopping around from city to city. So that was the first thing I realized. And then, honestly, I think it was just kind of this intuitive moment where I thought something wellness, something for me, something to like center me and learn more and expand myself. And so I just started Googling and then looking at different retreats that are out there, found one that aligned with what I was feeling in the moment and also the timing of when I was able to go. And I booked it. And it all worked out so beautifully.
That's awesome. So you mentioned you did two solo trips, two solo trips. Okay. Yeah. When did you do those?
So I went to Spain in 2016 and then New Zealand in 2018.
Okay. And now is that your main experiences with solo traveling?
With solo traveling, yes. I've been on planes on my own, but it's always been either meeting up with someone or visiting family or something like that. So those were my first trips. I, was on my own. The first couple of days were on my own, and then I met up with a tour group because for me, especially in Spain, I don't speak Spanish. I felt a little safer that way. And I, as a business owner, spent so much time making all the decisions and doing all the planning that once I got there, I didn't really want to worry about it. I just picked an itinerary that sounded fun, and I went with that.
Okay, that's awesome. What would you say was the biggest takeaway from your solo traveling experiences?
For the first trip, it was, oh, I can do this. I was so nervous beforehand that I had tears in my eyes as the plane was taking off. I wasn't nervous about the flight. That was fine. I was nervous about exploring a country on the other side of the world by myself when I don't speak the language. And it was really interesting. I ended up sitting next to a man on the plane who used to teach Spanish. And he taught me some phrases that I wrote in my journal just to kind of, help me out. And he was going to be in Barcelona, which is where we flew into for the same amount of time as me. And then he was moving on with his own travels. And he said, I'll help you get to your hotel. We were staying in different hotels. So he helped me get to my hotel. And we met up for dinner that night. He's married with grown kids. There was nothing, funny about that. It was just someone being friendly and helping me. And it was really lovely. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the first trip. And then, sorry, you had asked about my takeaways. And I would say the other takeaway has been how much more alike we are than we realize and how beautiful different cultures are. So many of them, I would say probably all of them. I only say many of them because I don't know all of the cultures out there, but all of the cultures I've experienced have been based on love and community. And experiencing that in different parts of the world has expanded my heart and my mind for sure.
Okay, that's great. So I've recently started doing some solo traveling myself, very, very recent. And I was scared shitless on my first solo trip. So do you have suggestions for anybody listening to transmute that fear a little bit and take the leap and take that solo trip?
Yeah, sure. For me, doing the tour group was helpful. I did spend a day on my own before I met up with the tour group. But for the tours that I did, you could choose to do activities with them or not. You kind of had to travel around with them. But if everybody was going to the beach and you didn't want to, or everybody was going to a gallery and you didn't want to, you don't have to. So you have kind of the safety of traveling in a group, but still the autonomy to choose within that what you'd like to do. If you're not comfortable traveling on your own in the beginning, you can add a couple of days on the end once you're a little bit more comfortable with wherever you're going. And another tip might be to start local. There's this really lovely inn that's about an hour and a half from me. And I think the first time I went there on my own, it was after my first big solo trip. But I did recommend it to a friend of, go there for a night by yourself. Have dinner on your own and see what that feels like. You know the language, you still have connection, like you're close enough to home, but it is a stepping stone. So if you're not ready to do, transatlantic flight on your own, then start with something smaller that still feels a little scary, but is a stepping stone towards the bigger trip.
Okay, I think those are great suggestions. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I love how you mentioned the small stepping stone. I've heard that people will emphasize that with weight loss, with the gym, with nutrition. all the fucking time. But
Yeah.
I've never heard it in terms of solo traveling or anything like that. So I really like that. And that's a way to start it, to still do a little solo trip, even if you make a weekend out of it,
Yes.
or even just a night, and experience it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was speaking with a client the other day who wanted to start working out and is in a very intense, busy industry and was feeling nervous about, you know what, as it picks up, as busy season picks up, I don't know how I'm going to maintain this. And I suggested that instead of looking so far ahead, just start tomorrow morning and don't start with the idea of like, I got to work out hardcore for 60 minutes every morning. Start with moving your body for 5 minutes tomorrow morning, whether that's stretches or jumping jacks or whatever resonates for you. Just reconnecting to your body instead of staying in your head and those cyclical thoughts of, I can't do this. I can't do this. Just move your body for 5 minutes and let's build on that. So those little steps can be applied to, you know, any part of our life.
That's very true. I like how you also mentioned reconnecting with our body. And like, you didn't say this part, but like being alone, just like getting quiet, listening to our inner self. Like, we have so much noise everywhere. Like, it don't matter where you turn, there's a notification. There's you're hearing something. You're hearing something. Like, and I think it would help so much. Like, so many people just have less anxiety, less depression, and just be more present by getting quiet and just sitting with yourself. Like, I say that all the time, even if you don't meditate, just sit in silence. Just sit. Just sit. Like, so many people can't do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I went to New Zealand the first day I was traveling on my own, and I took myself to a fancy dinner, doing a tasting menu by myself. So that's like a 2-hour dinner sitting by yourself. And I didn't have like data on my phone when I was traveling. So unless I was in a hotel or something, I wasn't connected. Literally just sitting by myself for 2 hours eating while everybody else is, you know, having their dinners. And that was a really great experience. And tuning into, like, back to what you said about having so much input from the external world, traveling on our own also gives us the opportunity to tune into what we want. So as a people pleaser, that can be really interesting because you travel and you do what you want, mostly when you want. And that can be empowering.
That is very true. No, that is so true. That actually, my first solo traveling trip, little tangent, there, I wanted to see some type of waterfall I wanted to see. So I Googled waterfalls in Utah. And I found this one that was beautiful. And I didn't find much information, but so it was like, they recommended a truck or an ATV. So I was like, okay, I'll switch my rental car for a rental SUV. I'm going on this. Everybody's like, maybe you shouldn't. You should have a truck. If it says a truck online. It was this whole off-roading adventure, and I destroyed the vehicle. I don't know how. I did not. Oh yeah, it was. I ended up on the top. I made it to the top of this mountain. It took me almost 2 hours, and it wasn't from once I got there. Oh yeah, and then at the top, I somehow got stuck on some rock thing, and it took 3 men to get this SUV with an ATV and this rope off of there. But it was very empowering because I said to everybody, I'm going up this waterfall. I don't care. Like, I don't care if I die going up it, I am going up it. And I really thought I was gonna, but I made it to the top and I made it back down. But
well, good for you. You did it. That's amazing.
no, and it was super empowering because even, that was that was another promise I made to myself. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. Everybody's like, you can't take a rental SUV up there. I'm like, what are they going to do?
Watch me.
Like,
Yeah.
what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And and it worked itself out. You know what you're meant to do, you're going to do.
That's right. Yes. I love that. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So I'd love to transition into a little bit how you made the shift from cakes to coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. So in amongst the cake world, while I was working in a lot, mostly weddings, but I met somebody who was seeing a life coach and had been for like 10 years. And at one point we became close friends, and I was kind of venting one day after another kind of failed attempt at a relationship. And I said, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm not sure like why I keep ending up in this place. I felt so stuck and I couldn't pinpoint why. And she said, would you be open to talking to a life coach? And I said, yeah, like I don't know what pattern I'm repeating, but I mean, I'm the common denominator. So I'm open to exploring. And so that started my personal journey with coaching. And that was, 8 years ago, I would say. And through that journey, I had learned so much that has changed my life that I just felt the pull to share what I learned with other people. I want everyone to have access to the peace, the calm, and kind of the freedom that I have found along my own journey. So that's what inspired my transition.
Okay, I gotcha. And now what made you first get into designing cakes in the first place?
So I think I haven't overthought my career, which is interesting as I used to be a chronic overthinker about so many things. But those types of decisions, I tended to just follow the flow, which I feel very fortunate about. I went to school for medical sciences and was working in that field. And when I graduated from university and was starting out, I would bake on the weekends and I would bring in the extras to my job. And people just started asking about it, saying, hey, I'm having family over. Can you make something for me? And I would say, yeah. And, my department would say, hey, we're having a departmental event. Can you make a cake to celebrate so-and-so? Sure. I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt excited to say yes. So that is the feeling I followed. And that is similar to the coaching where I was feeling expansive and excited, scared, but expansive about sharing this with other people. And that's what I have followed.
Okay, I gotcha. And now how did that first life coaching session go for you? The one that you had?
The one that I was the coach or the client?
The client, your first session.
So the first one, I'm fairly open-minded, but I certainly still want people to think well of me. So I know it took me a while to kind of get settled into not trying to prove myself to somebody in that role as a coach, right? And I find that's true for a lot of people. I'm not judging you. You don't have to prove anything to me, so you can let your guard down, but that takes time. I remember it's a bit of a long story that I don't need to share all the details out, though I'm happy to. The first day of my first coaching session as a client was the day of my first date with my current partner. Now, we kind of have done this. So we have not been together for 8 years. But I remember before our date, she said, don't overthink it. Go, enjoy your time. We talked about something. And my next session, I told her what happened. And she's like, okay, all right. And I was like, well, you told me not to overthink. And she said, I don't think you thought at all. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's so kind and loving. So I didn't take offense. I was just like, yeah, that's that pendulum swing when we kind of overcorrect at first. So you see that sometimes with people who are learning boundaries and they like start to implement boundaries and they get so like rigid with them and they become walls instead of kind of bridges to maintain connection. So we can over kind of course correct or overswing, and then we have to find a happy medium as we learn these tools.
So what do you mean by over swing the pendulum?
So so for me, moving from I was overthinking to not thinking at all, and it was like, oh, okay. So it's not about not thinking at all. It's about kind of tuning into my intuition, or for if you're setting boundaries, it's not about never being flexible with your boundaries. It's learning to follow through for yourself, but knowing when you can be flexible with them. But that all takes time. So, yes, my second session was an eye opener for sure.
Okay, I gotcha. And now, how long did you start attending sessions as a client before you made the transition to being a coach?
So I formally launched my coaching business about a year ago. So it's still fairly fresh, but I was kind of informally doing that with people in my life just to get some practice. I was often somebody people came to talk things out and things. So with their consent, we would kind of do informal coaching, and that happened for about a year beforehand. So yeah, it's been a couple years of working up to where I am now.
Okay. And how'd your first session with your first client go?
Surprisingly well, to be honest. I was very, very nervous. Just like the first tasting appointment I ever had as a cake designer, the nerves and the butterflies and oh, what if. And I got some great feedback from the client at the very end of our session, which I wasn't expecting. Not everyone is going to know what to make of our session initially, or, needs to sit with things for a bit. But the client was very gracious in their feedback. And it was a confidence booster for sure as someone kind of starting out, and you can get that kind of imposter syndrome of like, can I really do this? And so, yeah, that's been lovely.
That's awesome. So what do you typically work with your clients on? Like, are there niches you specialize in?
So there's three main niches that I tend to work on with people. It's self-esteem, perfectionism, and relationships. I mean, those three areas tend to cross over into every area of our life. So I had somebody who came and wanted to talk mostly about work, but the work problems all stemmed from these areas anyhow, right? So, but those are the three areas that I've had the most growth in, and I feel I can speak to the most.
Okay, I gotcha. I agree with you, though. I think those three do really tie into everything.
Yeah.
Because I even had someone tell me not too long ago that they don't consider themselves a perfectionist. And again, it comes down to the words, and you might not, but even like I said earlier, majority of us don't want to disappoint people. Like most of us, like some people, I'm sure you've got your negative Nancy,
Yes.
but like majority of people don't want to disappoint other people. So even if you don't classify yourself as a quote unquote perfectionist, you likely still have some behaviors of that, even if you don't consider yourself a perfectionist.
Absolutely. Yeah. If we're making decisions that are trying to avoid rejection or disappointing someone, then those perfectionist tendencies are there.
Yep. That is so true. And now, in terms of self-esteem, how do you work with your clients on that?
So a lot of it overlaps with a bit of what we talked about, people pleasing and kind of building that bank account by following through for ourselves. That's been a really big one for me. On top of that, the mindfulness part of observing your thoughts without judgment, right? So most of us carry around this inner critic that, have internalized voices and messages from, the time we were very young, and we're not even fully aware of it. So if we make a mistake, what does that voice say to us? Is it like, oops, let's try again next time? Or is it like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. How could I make that mistake? Ah, that like really fucked up my day. Or, like how harsh of a message are we receiving from our own internal self? And so tuning into that and working to have a more compassionate voice and really nurturing self-compassion is a foundational kind of component of my coaching approach.
Okay. No, I love that. And I think it's so true about the stuff that our head is saying. And even I notice sometimes there's certain instances where it's not harsh, but it's like paying attention. It might not be for everything. Like, okay, you slept later than the alarm. Well, maybe I'm okay with that. But there's certain things that you are harsh about yourself for.
Yeah.
I'm 2 minutes late to work, and it's like, really? You knew there's construction. Why didn't you plan ahead? So it's like paying attention to all of it.
Yeah.
Because you might give yourself some self-compassion in some areas, but do you all across the board?
That's right. That's a great point. Like there are areas where I didn't have much trouble with that. And there are other areas where I was like, oh gosh, this narrative that I've carried along and the critic that goes with that narrative are pretty harsh. And for me, a big one was, to, be successful as a woman, I should be married and have kids and by a certain age. And I'm don't have either of those things. And so working through that was a big journey for me. And I feel great about my life and where I am now, but it was not always like that.
I gotcha. Okay. I love how you tie in relationships too. Do you do that and focus in terms of romantic or just relationships in general?
I would say relationships in general. I have found in my own life that what I've learned and been able to integrate has affected both my, the relationship with my mom and my brother, my friends and partners. And it's in slightly different ways, but overall the tools are pretty much the same.
Yeah, no, it's really true because everything's a relationship, whether it's the relationship with yourself or even the relationship with your coworkers, people at work. Like those are still relationships,
Absolutely.
and you spend a lot of fucking time with those people. If you're working 40 hours a week,
Yeah, absolutely. And even as a cake designer, when I was exclusively doing that and how I interacted with clients, if I noticed that, they were feeling a little apprehensive because, leading up to a wedding, some people can get really anxious, which is normal. And so even understanding that, not taking it personally and not always feeling defensive about everything absolutely changed those dynamics as well.
Okay, I gotcha. Would you say life coaching has been the biggest catalyst to help you with these?
I would say yes, because myself seeing a life coach was what then led me to also explore some of the different somatic practices as well. So my life coach isn't necessarily the facilitator for breath work or, yoga and things like that, but it opened me up to a world that is more spiritual and connected to your body. And when I connected the life coaching to the somatic practices is when I felt like my growth really kind of started to take off.
Okay, so with the life coaching with the somatic practices.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there any one specific somatic practice that really stood out to you?
I think the one that I was kind of my entry point was being more aware of my breath and learning how to use that to regulate my nervous system. So when I was feeling defensive or anxious or anything like that, I could tune into it, regulate myself, and not be constantly making decisions from a place of fear or old patterns and stories. I could choose more intentionally a response that resonated with my core values.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, have you heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
Yes, absolutely.
I am a big fan of him. He's an author, a speaker. He's got a podcast called On Purpose, and he ends his podcast with 2 segments, and I've started incorporating them on my podcast as well. So the first segment is called The Many Sides to Us, and there's 5 questions that have to be answered in 1 word each.
Ooh, okay.
Number 1, what is 1 word someone who is meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Open.
Number 2, what is 1 word that someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you?
Compassionate.
Number 3, what is 1 word you'd use to describe yourself?
Evolving.
Number 4, what is 1 word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you?
Challenging.
Number 5, what is 1 word that you're trying to embody right now?
Balance.
The second segment is the final 5, and they can be answered in a sentence. Number 1, what is the best advice you've heard or received?
I would say the best advice I have recently received or has made the biggest impact in my life has been, it is safe to be you.
That's beautiful. Okay. Number 2, what is the worst advice you've heard or received?
Keep hustling.
Okay. Number 3, what is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Other people's opinions.
Number 4, if you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone were reading it, what would you want it to say?
I would want it to say that I always try to leave people feeling better about themselves than when I met them.
Number 5, if you could create 1 law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
That's a great one. I would say the law would be you have to take 3 long, deep breaths before you respond to anything.
I love that law. Sorry, go ahead.
And the reason is so that we're not just reacting and we're giving ourselves the space to tune in. So,
Okay. I have asked these questions for quite a bit, and that was my absolute favorite law. Just so you know, that was my favorite law. I think it's so true. The world would be such a different place if everyone took 3 breaths before they. I dated a man once who took a deep breath in before he would do anything. And in the moment, it was before I was like as mindful as I am. So it drove me nuts. But now I'm like, wow, that explains how he is so calm. Wow, I understand now.
Right? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The more heightened a conversation gets emotionally, most often the slower I speak. And I imagine for the other person that can feel so frustrating, like, get it out already. But there is a reason for it. And it is to try to keep us both kind of as grounded as possible. So,
No, I get it. I get it. It's very powerful. Even taking deep breaths in before you eat. Have you ever tried that?
yes,
Game
as an
changer.
yes, as an entrepreneur, I've certainly been in moments of that hustle culture where it's like, go, 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 eat on the fly. And it's like, oh, that's not good for me. So taking that deep breath and really enjoying my food and stuff. Breathing, so good, so underrated.
I completely agree. Now I have one more question for you. Can you share with us the resources that you utilize consistently to be successful?
Uh, I absolutely can. I'm happy to. Is there a certain type of resource that you have in mind, or just what do I use in general?
However you take that.
Okay, yeah, fair. So I still talk to a life coach because I still want a touchstone along my journey. Helps keep me grounded. She also mentors me, so there's that part to it as well. So somebody that you trust and that you look up to is a great source when you're starting out on your own as a mentor, if they'll take you on. Finding other people who I look up to who might not be mentoring me personally, but just to feel inspired by, to keep going. It's not about hustling, but finding people who, yes, I feel aligned with what their message is, and just kind of surrounding myself with those people and those sources of inspiration. Self-care is really big because, especially starting a new business, it's a mentally tough thing to do and it is draining. And so making sure that we take care of ourselves, whether for me, that's been making sure there's the yoga in the morning lately, getting time outside, putting my face in the sun once it's out and shining again, and tuning into what my body needs in any given moment. That's been really helpful. And supportive friends and family. I'm a big advocate for learning to be your biggest cheerleader, but that doesn't mean we always can do it on our own. We still need a cheering section on the really tough days or when we have fumbled and just that inner critic is winning a little bit. And it's like, I need a little bit of extra push, a little bit of extra cushion in this fall. Can you help support me? And so if you have a really good group there, that's also really helpful.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I really appreciate it. Now, is there anything else you want to share with the listeners?
Nothing in particular. Maybe just if you're tuning in, then I imagine that you're somewhere in your journey of personal growth and keep going. It's even on the hard days, it's so worthwhile. You are so worthwhile. And keep going.
I love that. Thank you so much. And where can the listeners connect with you and find out more about you?
So I am most active on Instagram. It's at Your Journey Back to Self. So you can find me there. I am also on Facebook and LinkedIn under Christina Wong and Your Journey Back to Self. And I have a website, which is yourjourneybacktoself.com.
Okay, awesome. And I will link all of that in the show notes so you guys can connect with Christina directly. And thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was such a lovely conversation. I loved your questions.
Oh, thank you. Of course. And thank you guys for tuning in to Mander's Mindset. Hey guys, Mander's here. And I really hope you enjoyed that fun and engaging conversation that I had with Christina. She had a lot of points that really resonated with me. And I personally took a lot away from this. And I hope you guys did as well. A few things I want to emphasize that I hope you guys definitely take away from this episode. Christina talked about how she follows through with what she needs and about keeping promises to herself. And something that has helped her with this is getting really in touch with and understanding what her individual core values are. And if you don't understand what your own core values are, it is going to be more difficult to follow through with the promises you make because you aren't rooted in what is important to you. So you need to figure out your core values and what matters most to you. And that's going to be different from other people as well. Christina also talked about something that I really resonated with, and about how she used to struggle for a long time with constantly seeking people in her lives' opinions on decisions she should make. And she emphasized how we don't need to ask anybody. More often than not, we just need to quiet down and tune into ourselves. You don't need to outsource it. And I really love and appreciate how she emphasized the importance of our breath and taking a breath before making a decision, before responding. If you were to take a big, deep breath in and release it out, or even 3 deep breaths in and release them out, that would shift your state. Give it a shot and tell me it doesn't, because I promise you it will. And it is much better to make decisions or have conversations with other people when we are in a more neutral, calm, collective state. It's going to work out better for everybody, all across the board, if we are in a more neutral, not attack, fight, or flight state. Christina also got into how if she is having a conversation with her partner or someone she is close with, and she is starting to feel a certain emotion, whether it's defensiveness or any negative type of emotion, that she just needs a break, she openly says that. And I think that's very powerful, to have the courage to use your voice and say, I am feeling defensive right now. Can we take a break from this conversation? Because using our throat chakras and speaking up is only going to help our relationship with ourselves and our relationships with other people. So that is something I'm going to start doing, because I personally struggle with that. I've worked on it a lot, but I struggle with, if I get upset with someone and just wanting to discuss it and not taking a break and figuring out and getting to the bottom of it. But sometimes you need to pause. You need to take that step back, let it sit, let it simmer, when you can both come back to a calm, collective state. Take a few deep breaths in, get away from the conversation, and come back and reconvene. And the last thing I want to make sure y'all take away from what Christina said, and now this is something I have not heard in this reference, but she emphasized the importance of small steps to achieving or doing anything we want to do. And I mentioned this is very well known, especially within the bodybuilding culture. But Christina emphasized it in terms of traveling and solo traveling. She even talked about how you could even start by going to a local inn that's an hour or so away from you, spending one night there, or even going to dinner by yourself. Starting small and starting by spending time with your individual self, you will grow from that. It will help you expand and evolve. And it will also help you understand yourself better than you currently do. And I think the biggest lesson overall, anything you want to do, whether it's a goal you want to achieve, somewhere you want to go, something you want to happen, start it small. It's a great way to ensure long-lasting results and to ensure that the situation will be better for you. If you took a small traveling experience prior to a bigger one, it would help you be more familiar with actually doing it, even like Christina's example. And okay, guys, so I'm sure there is something in your life that you want to do or you want to achieve, whatever it is. What is the small, actionable step you can take soon, if not today, very soon, that will get you one step closer to embodying and being and identifying as the person who does X? You are capable of it. Well, if you've listened to me this far, thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation that I had with Christina. And thanks for listening to Amanda's Mindset. And stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks, guys.